see what I saw? Was that woman... Anyway, today is Earth Day, marked by marches around the entire world, really. Problem is, it's all made up. It's crassly political, and they've infiltrated our classrooms to both frighten and indoctrinate our children. Here's a sample of the kind of garbage being shown to students.
In recent years, our world has been devastated by hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, and droughts. What does the future hold for planet Earth? The place we all call home. Climate change could destroy the world that we live in. Scientists predict that within 50 years, many parts of our world could be under 20 centimeters of water. We can prevent this if we all work together. There is still time for us to save our world. Solar panels, wind farms, and underwater turbines are being used to produce renewable energy. Tell your parents, your grandparents, and your friends to do the small things that count. We must take it step by step to make sure that you have a future to grow up in.
Spooky, and those children didn't have any faces either. Now, we need to expose this, and who better than Tom Harris, Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition, who spent 30 years working in the area of energy and environment and is prepared to speak truth to the power of the radical agenda. Welcome to you, my friend.
Yeah, and happy Earth Day to you.
Now, the origins of this, I don't want to be too conspiracy-minded, but it is the 100th anniversary of the birth of Vladimir Lenin. Why did they choose that particular date?
Well, I don't know. I think maybe it was a coincidence, but it is interesting that a lot of their goals are very similar to Lenin's goals. I mean, many of them are, of course, focused on world government, world socialism, pulling the West down, things like that, which is very communist in its orientation. If I were a climate activist, if I were an environmental activist, I would want to kick the climate activists completely off the stage because, Earth Day was formed before the global warming scare even started, and they were focused at times on sensible things, and they've been quite successful. We've seen air pollution levels in Canada reduce over the decades, except for a slight increase in ground level ozone. The Great Lakes have been cleaned up. The peregrine falcon is coming back. There's all kinds of successes that we should focus on, not just this negative stuff. So the original purpose of Earth Day has generally been successful. The trouble is it's been hijacked by the climate activists. And the big problem here is both for science and some rational environmentalists is that once their cause, the climate change cause, is exposed as bogus, the whole environmental movement is going to be disgraced.
Now, that's a very good point, because there is nothing non-conservative, for example, about caring for the environment. On the contrary, in fact. And a lot has been achieved. But it is rather derailed by the obsessives who moan on about climate. And so when it comes to recycling and personal responsibility, they don't really even particularly care about those issues.
No, and it's sad because you see legitimate concerns like cleaning up the Ottawa River, which is right beside us here. They say, in light of the extreme climate change, we have to do X. Well, no, we just have to clean up the river. It doesn't have anything to do with climate change. So many of these causes are couched in terms of climate change. And that's a big problem, because right now the science is falling apart. As you know, I've held up this report before. They just came out with a new one a few days ago, which shows very clearly that we don't have a climate crisis. In fact, the most recent report shows a very interesting thing. One of the environmental benefits of the use of fossil fuels is we've seen an increase in carbon dioxide, which, according to NASA satellites over the last 30 years, has resulted in a greening of the Earth, an increase in crop productivity, an increase in the density of forests. So we're seeing actual success as a result of the CO2 buildup.
It is a little worrying, though, when kids are being exposed to this sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And they are very malleable, they're very vulnerable. Are we producing a generation of people who have believed everything told to them about environmentalism and climate change?
Yes, and what we really need is to encourage critical thinking. A friend of mine just came here from Egypt, and he brought his little son, and his son's in grade 7, and he was saying, I'm going to have to tell them all about, the reality of climate change, because his father's a PhD in energy, and he knows a lot about this field. Well, he came back very sad the next day and said, oh my, it's like a religion. I can't even bring it up. And now I have to do a project on climate change caused by dangerous human activity. So it's a real problem. problem because they're not being taught critical thinking. You know, they're not taught things like, should we really have compact fluorescent light bulbs when you count the cost of making them, which is much more energy intensive, the cost of actually disposing of the mercury? Are they a net benefit? Oh no, we have to reduce energy consumption during its lifetime. They don't even look at the whole thing. So the trouble is, children are not being taught to be scientifically minded and to actually engage in critical thinking. That's what they need to do. Ask questions. Why are we recycling glass? Okay, there was a Swedish study that said recycling glass damages the environment more than just throwing it in a landfill. Okay, because after all, it's just sand and it's going to return to being sand again. Instead, we run around carefully and we pick up all our glass and we clean them and everything else and recycle. No, we got to re-examine many of these things. You know, one of the things we have to look at is the comparison of coal to the real impact of alternative energies.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll have to do that on another occasion because we're running out of time. I have to say, though, to quote a great musician, I do love the sound of breaking glass. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you, Michael.